Israel's government is facing calls for a ceasefire from some of its closest European allies. Today is Monday, December 18th, 2023, and this is the Dunkley Report. Israel's government is facing calls for a ceasefire from some of its closest European allies. Protesters at home also want a ceasefire to free more hostages. The deadly shooting of 3 hostages who waved a white flag added to concerns about Israel's wartime conduct. Israel could come under more pressure to scale back major combat operations when the U.S. Defense Secretary visits Monday. Gaza's communications blackout is easing after 4 days. It's the longest such outage of the war. Aid to Gaza remains far below what's needed. Dozens of people there are chasing down humanitarian trucks and pulling boxes off them. As Russian forces press forward with an attempt to capture the town of Avdiivka in eastern Ukraine, the Associated Press obtained aerial footage that indicates their staggering losses. The bodies of about 150 soldiers, most wearing Russian uniforms, lie scattered as they sought cover outside Stebov, a village north of Avdiivka, where some of the most intense battles have taken place. The village itself has been reduced to rubble. The fields are pocked by artillery shells and grenades dropped from drones. Soldiers lie where they died. The drone unit said, "It's possible that some of the dead were Ukrainians." South Korea's military says North Korea has fired a short-range ballistic missile in the sea in a possible display of defiance against the steps by Washington and Seoul to tighten nuclear deterrence against North Korean threats. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the missile was fired Sunday night from an area near the North Korean capital of Pyongyang and landed in the sea. The launch followed high-level security talks between American and South Korean officials in Washington over the weekend, where they agreed on plans to update their nuclear deterrence and contingency strategies to cope with the North's evolving threats. The Israeli military says it has excavated a large tunnel shaft in Gaza, close to a major crossing with Israel. The discovery of the tunnel near the Erez crossing raises more questions about how Israeli surveillance could have missed such conspicuous preparations by Hamas for a deadly October 7th assault that triggered a war that has raged over 10 weeks. The entryway to the tunnel is just walking distance from the Erez crossing and a nearby Israeli military base. The military said it stretches for over 2.5 miles, links up with a sprawling tunnel network across Gaza, and is wide enough for cars to pass through. Russia and Ukraine have launched over a dozen drones at each other's territory for a second straight day. The Russian Defense Ministry said in a post on the messaging app Telegram that its forces shot down at least 35 Ukrainian drones over 3 regions in southwestern Russia. Among the reported targets was a Russian air base hosting bomber aircraft used in Ukraine. Also, Sunday morning, Ukraine's Air Force said it shot down 20 Iranian-made Shahed drones launched overnight by Russian troops in southern and western Ukraine, as well as 1 cruise missile. A civilian was reported killed overnight near Odessa, a key Black Sea port, after the remnants of a destroyed drone fell on his house. Serbia's governing populists have claimed a sweeping victory in the country's parliamentary election, which have been marred by reports of major irregularities both during a tense campaign and on voting day. Prime Minister Ana Brnabić said that, with half of the ballots counted, the governing Serbian Progressive Party's projections show that President Aleksandar Vučić's populists won 47% of the vote Sunday and expects to hold around 130 seats in the 250-member assembly. Brnabić says the main opposition, Serbia Against Violence group, won around 23%. The opposition group is disputing the election projections from the governing party. It charges there was vote rigging and says it will dispute the vote count by all democratic means. An Israeli mother who was held in Hamas captivity for 49 days has described in an interview the trials of caring for 2 young children as a hostage. Doron Katz-Asher told Israeli Channel 12 TV that she feared her daughters would be taken from her if she took her eyes off them. Using the bathroom hinged on the permission of her captors. Her daughters had developed fever, and if they cried, she said militants would bang on the door of the room where they were held. In the interview, aired late Saturday, Katz-Asher said she found strength in her daughters. Her account builds on a growing number of testimonies by other freed captives. Roughly 129 hostages remain in Hamas captivity. The jungle between Colombia and Panama used to be impenetrable for migrants heading north from Latin America. This year, it became a highway for hundreds of thousands of people from around the world. Migrants from China to Mauritania were enabled by social media. Colombian organized crime also played a role. More than 506,000 migrants, nearly 2/3 Venezuelans, had crossed the Darien jungle by mid-December. That was double the 248,000 who set a record the previous year. Before last year, the record was barely 30,000 in 2016. It wasn't only in Latin America. The number of migrants crossing the Mediterranean or the Atlantic on small boats to reach Europe this year has also surged. Chilean voters have rejected a conservative constitution to replace the country's dictatorship-era charter, a little over a year after turning down a proposed leftist charter. Sunday's result underlines the deep division in the South American country and the inability of the political sectors to convey people's demands for change made 4 years ago. With nearly all votes counted late Sunday, about 55.8% had voted no to the new charter, with about 44.2% in favor. In September 2022, voters resoundingly rejected a proposed constitution that had been written by a left-leaning convention. The new document up for approval Sunday was largely written by conservative counselors, and some warned it went to the other extreme. Pope Francis is marking a birthday. He turned 87 on Sunday. It closes out a year that saw big milestones in his efforts to reform the Catholic Church, as well as health scares that raise questions about his future as Pope. Francis celebrated his birthday with cake during a festive audience with children Sunday morning. And there were happy birthday banners in St. Peter's Square during his weekly noon blessing. One early birthday present came Saturday. A Vatican tribunal handed down a mix of guilty verdicts and acquittals in a complicated trial that Francis had supported as evidence of his financial reforms. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the World News for Monday, December 18th. Thanks again for joining us at The Dunkley Report.